So I think we're ready to start, and I'm going to introduce Matt Laslo, who I'm very glad to see again. Matt is based on Capitol Hill. He has been covering Congress, the White House, the Supreme Court since 2006. We hear him on NPR. I hear you a lot on NPR. They're keeping you. No, they're keeping you very busy. I think that's great. But his work also has appeared in The Atlantic, Campaigns and Elections magazine, Chattanooga Times Free Press, a whole slew of other places. So Matt has a lot of experience, both in print and on the air, covering Capitol Hill and the White House, etc. But he's going to focus mostly this morning on covering Congress on the air, in words. So thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to it.
And you guys probably do this every time and probably hate it, but if you could go around and just give me your name, how many years you've been in D.C. in publication, and where do you want to end up?
And I didn't mention that Matt is a former Paul Miller Fellow, so he knows just how much you hate it, but
yeah.
He's going to make you do it anyway.
My name is Tal Copen. I'm a reporter for Politico. I've been there about 2.5 years doing different things. Right now, I'm a cybersecurity policy reporter.
Nice.
Before that, I was in local TV news in Chicago for
nice.
2 to 3 years.
I'm from Chicago.
Nice.
Hi there, Mark Albert. I'm a freelance correspondent with CBS News
Cool.
and WUSA sometimes.
Nice.
Moved to DC in October last year. Wanted to live here since I was 11 years old.
Yes.
So after 8 years at the ABC affiliate in Minneapolis, I said thanks very much, and I'm hitting the road.
There
so
you
I
go.
just moved back here without a job and freelancing right now.
Nice. Welcome.
Albert living the dream.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm Emery Freeman. I have lived in DC for about 4.5 years. I've been working for the New York Times for the past 4. And I just kind of do general assignment work.
Nice.
Laura Olson. I work for the Allentown, Pennsylvania Morning Call.
Nice.
I got here in June, and before that, I was covering state houses in California and in Pennsylvania.
Regional proud.
I'm Sarah Wire. I'm correspondent for the Arkansas Democrat.
Nice.
I've been here about a year, but I've been on the paper for about 5.
So you work with Peter? Nice.
Against specific.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
I'm Kimberly. I'm with the Dallas Morning News. I've been there since the start of July, and I mainly cover Congress and just other political issues.
And you're with Todd
Yes.
Gilman. Nice. Good.
I know Vina, with Reuters. I do mostly economic ideas. Been in DC close to 2 years, all the time at Reuters. What else? That's it.
Yeah. Works. Thank you.
Sarah Tobiansky. I'm a producer at C-SPAN, and I've been here about 10 years because I came here to go to American University.
Nice.
I'm Amber Phillips. I'm a correspondent for the Las Vegas Sun, and I've been here this job 6 months and DC 3.5 years.
My name is John Ketchum. I work at NPR. Been here since April. Before this, I was at Marketplace in LA for 2 years.
What desk are you on?
I work for Morning Edition.
Cool.
So, my desk.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm Elizabeth Arbel. I am about to start my 3rd year in environmental.
Cool.
I'm Dustin Boltz. I'm a tech policy writer for National Journal. For my first job, I've been in DC since last summer.
I'm Kedar Papi. I'm with Defense One. I grew up in Northern Virginia, so I've been here for a while.
Nice.
I've been at Defense One for a year, 2 months, or 3 months.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm Connor O'Brien. I'm with CQ Roll Call. I've been in DC for about 4 years. I spent 2 years as a researcher on state regulations and legislation with CQ, and now I'm a defense and veterans reporter, which I've been doing for about a year.
Great.
My name is Hadley Malcolm. I'm a personal finance reporter at USA Today. I've been there a little over 3 years. I've been in DC for 7 years. I went to GW, so.
Michael Gaynor. I've been in DC for about 5 years. Started as an intern at the Washingtonian magazine, and now I am a research editor and writer there.
Nice. I've written for them.
Dan Bush. I also work at ED News with Elizabeth. I cover politics. I've been in DC for a little over a year. Before that, I covered city and state politics in New York.
Adam O'Neill, I'm a general assignment reporter at Realtor Politics, and I've been in DC about a year. Hi, I'm Carixa Jimenez. I produce international news at Associated Press Television News, APTN. And I've been there for about 3 years, and I did undergrad and graduate school in D.C. So.
Cool. Okay.
I'm Allie Dukakis. I work at ABC. I've been there for the last 3 years. I've been in DC for 4, a little over 4, and started as an intern at All Things Considered, and then
nice.
produced there and went on to ABC.
Cool. So you guys run the gamut. It's pretty great. So like you said, I've been in DC about 8 years. I have my MA from Hopkins in government and public policy. So I do some lectures every once in a while. I'm gonna not start focusing on radio. My academic area of research was the increase in partisanship from the 70s on. So that's kind of the lens that I view congressional reporting. And then I'm also on the Regional Reporters Association. And I say we represent the dwindling number of regional reporters in DC. The latest numbers that I've seen were in 2009. Pew put out a study about the number of bureaus in Washington. Back in the 80s, we had about, I think it was about 560 bureaus in DC. As of 2009, that number went to like 200. So our ranks just got decimated. And a lot of that was regional reporters. But then we've also seen an uptick in BuzzFeed, Red State, Huffington Post, these partisan media outlets who are filling in the ranks of Capitol Hill now, which really kind of changes our role with lawmakers who are just very adept at latching on to new media. And so what we're witnessing now is kind of nothing new. The first telegraph line placed in the nation was from Baltimore to the Capitol, so lawmakers have always been good at latching onto new technologies. But now with the press corps just basically being decimated, one of my fellow board members on the Regional Reporters Association, he used to lead a bureau of 20 for Newsday. Now he's a bureau of 1 for Newsday. Salt Lake Tribune just went from 2 reporters to 1. Dallas Morning News is now 2. Technically 1. So you're seeing all these prying eyes that used to look at lawmakers, like who, when DeLay and Ney and all these guys got taken down, it was by a local reporter digging in their documents. So now these lawmakers basically get a free pass when they're here in DC. They send out these press releases, but both video press releases and audio press releases that a lot of editors across the nation just either print without even, they just say this is a message from your lawmaker and put it in the paper or put it online. Or if they're a local TV station in, say, Wyoming, they'll just take something shot with green screens on the Capitol grounds with Senator Barrasso with the Grand Tetons in back of him. And he looks like he's everyday Wyoming. No, he's here in D.C. And so they just take these little shiny packages, send it out, and they just completely bypass the contemporary press corps. They're also doing this with Twitter, social media stuff. So first off, I call the Capitol the greatest re-election center on earth ever known to man. There's literally...
I'll stop you 1 minute. Can you guys hear him in the back?
Yeah.
You're good. Okay, sorry.
Nice.
It's just me.
And tell me if you can't do this. I'm still waking up myself. But so lawmakers have become the first-person storytellers of Capitol Hill, which kind of changes our relationship as the press corps. In one sense, we're now competing with lawmakers for listeners, for readers, and they've learned how to just bypass us. Whether it's these Twitter competitions or Facebook competitions where they're literally learning how to just go around the media. I just did a series of stories on franked mail. Lawmakers are now using franked mail to buy Facebook, Google ads, Twitter ads. It's kind of amazing. If you haven't been down there, go down to the Cannon building and dig around in some of the franked mail stuff. I think the most is Congressman Peter Cook, maybe from California, spent like $360,000 on it. The average is about $50,000. But long-time incumbents don't spend anything because they have the name recognition, they don't need it, and they're stout at fundraising. But all these new lawmakers are spending tens, 20s, hundreds of thousands of dollars on these things, which I'd argue is different than the founders in the first Congress when they adopted the practice ever envisioned. But then what do we have that coupled with? A more distracted press corps. We're being told by our editors to give them pictures, to tweet, to send them video, to do a print version, to also do a radio version. So lawmakers are, in one sense, getting a leg up on us. They have their federal staff and then also their campaign staffs who are working very well at going around us and completely bypassing us, which puts the contemporary press corps in a very weird position. We're getting paid less. We're being told to work harder, work longer, to do more. So to me, the simple solution is just the basics are still the most important. Accuracy. If you get something wrong, the lawmakers' staffs will beat you up on Twitter. They'll decimate you. So if you're not accurate, and then you lose the trust of your audience. So the accuracy and then trust of your readers is still the most important. But then also it's having fun with new media and all of that. So it's mastering every medium, learning how to tell a story in a multifaceted way to really pull in an audience and sustain them. Because this is a Twitter generation that's very distracted. They'd rather watch Tom DeLay on Dancing with the Stars than read our copy on Frank's Mail or whatnot. But then also just be aggressive about going on the platforms that the lawmakers are on. Back when I was first on Twitter, if I would drop a story for St. Louis Public Radio on Senator McCaskill, who's very good at Twitter, I would go on her page and follow a bunch of people who she interacted with and who I knew were big into politics there, get some of them to latch onto the story so that they'd be tweeting it out to the same audience that she's connecting with. So there's ways to compete with lawmakers on these mediums that I think the press corps has to be better at. We have to, because a lot of times, like Bachman and King and all these guys, they've gotten an audience, and even Ted Cruz, they've learned, and even Senator Warren, they have an audience that's outside of us. And so we need to learn how to find their readers who probably don't trust us, either from the left or the right, and just be aggressive about telling those compelling stories, but also, in a sense, stealing their audiences. So that's my little spiel on the increase in partisanship. They left this very wide open for me. So at any point, stop with questions and all that stuff.
When you said you went and found McCaskill's audience, you said you followed a bunch of her people,
Yeah.
or did you literally tweet your story at them?
So Twitter, so Twitter's made it harder now, but I would just troll her followers and see the ones who are active in state politics and active in following her, and then you can still do it.
Right. Yeah.
It's just more clicking now, but.
And do you actually tweet your stories at them?
Sometimes, yeah.
So is there an anecdote or a specific illustration where you kind of, I mean, it almost sounds like you can get into a pitch battle on Twitter with a specific.
The lawmakers won't bite because usually their staff's running it in real time. They might be sending out tweets,
right?
But the staff has it in real time, and if it's a smart staffer, they won't bite, especially if it's not a flattering piece. But sometimes they will, and they'll just knee-jerk retweet it.
So to be clear, just that I understand this, so you would go through, follow, and then
wait a little bit.
Reply, add with your link.
Then you wait a little bit, wait for them to follow you back, and then they see the story. Yeah.
I didn't know if you were putting their handle first and then the link, so that
sometimes
it dings on there. Okay.
And you can also send out a story 2 or 3 times under a different headline.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Is that the most effective strategy you found on Twitter for getting your stories out there?
Yeah, or getting other reporters to tweet them out who have big followings.
Right.
And then do you stop following these people after they retweet?
Okay, thanks, bye.
Their usefulness is gone. Yeah, you gotta be a little Machiavellian.
You talk about the increase of members on social media is sort of a bad thing, an end around. But what's your take on, reporting what they're doing on social media, which sometimes is like inane, but sometimes like they get themselves into trouble or are doing weird things, and it actually can sometimes create more access in a weird way.
I mean, it's great reading Chuck Grassley's tweets.
Yeah.
They're freaking ridiculous, and that guy should not be allowed to be on Twitter because you can't even read it. Seeing their thoughts, it's great, especially when they put their foot in their mouth. I support it 100%. I want to see more of what's actually going on in their minds instead of what they're saying in press releases and on the floor. Yeah, so I support all that. And you have to report on it. Sometimes our tendency is to sensationalize what they're doing, and then I don't know, a lot of reporters also, because there's the time pressure from our editors and whatnot, so it annoys me when I read a story on, say, Politico or The Hill, where lawmakers are saying this, and it's just a story about 3 lawmakers tweeting out something about we need troops on the ground against ISIS. Yes, that information's there. You've now found a trend in Congress, but it's 3 or so lawmakers on Twitter. Go do a fricking interview, talk to the lawmaker. I don't know, I think there's become a laziness in the press corps where we rely upon Twitter to do our job for us. So hitting the marble halls is still pretty vital. And then also, because that's, I think, the big problem with the way lawmakers have stacked the decks against us, with the way they put out these press releases, the way they use the green screens in the recording studios in the Capitol. They're kind of undercutting us. So we can feed into that by just letting them tell their story without us getting follow-up questions. Yeah, so I think getting them on record is still key. And, the first version of that story can just rely on Twitter, but then the one that ends up in print the next day should actually involve a few interviews, hopefully.
Your opening statement was kind of the most dire, bleak, and honest assessment of where DC media is right now. Maybe it's because it's only 9:20 in the morning.
Yeah.
You haven't had your coffee yet, but you don't seem particularly optimistic. Do you have reason to think that things are going to, that balance is going to kind of shift back toward the press and media and accountability journalism? Or do you think this is kind of a trend that's going to continue?
I don't think our industry knows. We're still, because apart from the shitty economy, journalism was already spiraling out in the 90s. And when I was here, I had to bite my tongue because we had Len Downey come in and address our class. And he was doing a year-long something commissioned by Columbia Journalism Review on the future of journalism, etc. And I just wanted to throw something at him and be like, you're the one who crashed the ship. You were at the helm in the 90s when the ship started going under. But I've forgiven him.
You could have said it.
I know.
You could have asked.
I was still waking up, I believe.
He's a former professor of mine, so I'll make sure to tell him.
Oh, really? But no, so I don't think our industry quite knows. And right now, we're seeing all these publications play around with different models. We'll see what Bezos does with the Post. But I don't think our industry knows. And who was it? New York Times just laid off another 100. Yeah. This is just commonplace now for newsrooms. So, yeah, I think our ranks are still getting decimated. But then you see something like Bloomberg dumping a lot of money in. Politico seems to be expanding.
Isn't Bloomberg a subscriber model, though? Do they have a paywall?
It's both. I think there is a paywall, but Bloomberg's kind of everything. My girlfriend works for them, so she's on their breaking news desk. I get some of their stuff for free.
But they just gutted their TV newsroom here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moved everything to New York for their new politics thing they launched last night.
Yeah.
Interesting to see what happens with that now that Mike has taken the helm again. And
Yeah.
see what direction he goes.
So I think there's a lot of room for creativity within the industry. But we'll see if editors and people at the helm are going to figure it out. That's the other thing. I was full-time for about two and a half years. I used to work for a group called Capital News Connection that covered Congress for about 40 local NPR stations. They kind of went under. I kind of took over their business. So now I cover Congress for about 15 local NPR stations. And then I also have another business, which I'll show you guys later, called Bills and Brews, where it's me sitting down with lawmakers. They drink a craft beer from their district. I drink whoever's sponsoring me. So I'm actually hitting the road right after this to go down to North Carolina to shoot.
Hagen?
I'm not going to say because I'm in a room full of reporters, but wait for it next week. So I think there's a lot of room for creativity for us, either to start our own companies or even as freelancers, to just pave our own way, because a lot of these people at the top don't get it, and I don't really trust them with our industry. But with that, because our editors don't understand the new media landscape, that gives us a lot of room to teach them and to pull them along, and also to be really creative. So as far as journalists on the ground, I think I'm optimistic that I get to play around in this new media landscape, and that editors, for the most part, are open to it. If you pitch them a good story that's multimedia rich, it's, for one, a great clip for you, great for readers or listeners, but then also it's going to make your editor look good. And if they're a smart editor, they're going to let you be creative and bend and pull the old boundaries. So it's exciting for us, but as far as the industry, we'll see. I think the ship will be righted. It's just going to be different. What that looks like, we'll see. Sorry.
So you said you covered for 20 different NPR stations?
About, yeah.
Is that, and that's mostly regional, is that right? Or?
Yeah.
So when you actually write your stories, do you have to, are you pulled to focus on any specific area that asks you, or do you just write for the entire, as a big picture take on Congress?
So I'm general assignment, but when we just did the Frank Mail story, right now I have 3 interns. 2 of them are older MA students. So I had them just document digging. So we probably pulled the Frank Mail documents on about 60 or 70 lawmakers. So it was pretty tedious. I was up in Maine vacationing while they were document digging, which was great. And then
I have interns.
Yes, the interns are amazing. But then,
Paying those interns.
What's that?
I hope you're paying your interns.
School credit. Well, no, when you give them school credit, you're not allowed to pay them at a lot of institutions. They technically are paying for that service. Yeah. I know, it's beautiful.
A lot of internships require you to be getting school credit.
Right.
But so for that, it was unique stories. I can sell the same intro for Philadelphia Public Radio that I'm selling to Sacramento Public Radio and Miami Public Radio, but all the documentation and research has to be on those individual lawmakers. So we would kind of focus on the person who spent the most on Frank Mail in that region, and then the least. But then, if I do an energy story, so I'm general assignment through and through. My niche is kind of campaigns and elections and politics. I think I put 9,000 miles on the campaign trail in 2012. So that's where I like to be, and that's where I do magazine features and stuff. But my bread and butter is Congress. So if I do an energy story for Wyoming Public Radio, it's going to be a lot different than if I do it for my Connecticut stations, which is all liberals, and then Wyoming is 3 Republicans. But the way I've convinced a lot of my editors is that a story can have a regional impact without voices from your region. And just because you talk to Senator Cruz doesn't mean it's a Texas story per se. So if I do an energy story for Wyoming, I'll sometimes throw in a Connecticut voice. And the editor there likes it because it's a different voice than his listeners are used to hearing. And then the same for the Connecticut or upstate New York story. I'll throw in a conservative voice from the West, which balances it out, but also shows, because it's boring, some of the delegations, like Wyoming, 3 Republicans. My Connecticut station is, 5 raging liberals. And then, luckily, we have a signal in Long Island, so then I get Peter King, who knows what Peter King is thinking at any time, except terrorist bad.
2016.
Yeah.
At the risk of completely derailing, if you have
No.
a plan, I was going to ask a similar question to Kadar, but one, following up on him, so are people in Washington asking you to do things, or are the stations themselves asking you to cover?
Every once in a while, but usually at the beginning of the week I pitch them.
Okay.
And even now I've gotten to the point where I'll just, because I have so many clients, I a lot of times just do the interviews and then see if there's a story there, and then talk to my stations and be like, hey, I've got a good story for you. I was talking to the senator about blank and blank, and usually they'll say yes. With WAMU, I have a pretty sweet deal where I'm basically their politics editor, so I get I'm a part-time employee with them, so I work 27 hours a week with them, which comes down to just 8 stories. This morning I had a 2-minute mini feature, so I'll charge them for 4 stories for that, or maybe 2.5. I don't know. I give them a lot. It's DC, so all the lawmakers and their staffs hear me, so it's good for me personally to have a presence here on the air. But so with that, I'll pitch them twice a week in the middle of the week, but they'll take anything I give them. And if I pitch them in the morning and that's accepted, and then news breaks, I'll just say, hey, we're not doing that story, we're doing this. And it's, I don't know, just gaining the trust of your editors is pretty sweet.
And I was going to ask, following up on the conversation we were having a little bit before, I think when we talk about like what is going to happen in journalism, I mean, part of it is what succeeds, right? Like, what is there an appetite for, and what is the market reward? If the market just rewards the storifies we do of, who said what on Twitter, then but if it rewards the more in-depth pieces. So my question was, do you find that these local markets that are cutting back on reporters have a big appetite for your stories from the Hill and what their delegation is up to, and what's that like?
Well, I think there's definitely a universal appetite for it. Sometimes it's convincing local editors, because that's a part of the problem. A lot of these editors, like I've done work for Chattanooga Times Free Press, they don't just put up press releases. Or no, when I was working for them, they only wanted to hear, back when Zach Wamp was the congressman, they only wanted to hear from Wamp because he's Chattanooga, Senator Alexander, and Senator Corker, and then the Georgians. I'm like, you only want Republican voices. I was like, what about the liberal Cohen from Memphis? I'm like, do you want any tension in this piece? I'm like, you want me to write a press release? So I had to can them as a client, because I'm not writing press releases for stories with no tension. So I think now they've just gone to putting the press releases straight on their website. So a lot of it's convincing those editors, hey, you're doing a disservice. You're helping out the incumbency advantage, you're giving them free media, which lawmakers understand completely. Senator Warner, who knows me, respects me because I'm Virginia Public Radio and WAMU, but he's just not the most talkative guy. Right ahead of his election, or no, right when Gillespie hops in, whenever I want Senator Warner, I've got him for a 5-minute sit down. And I noticed this happen like 2 or 3 times. And the other thing that was happening was Senator Reed was moving his bills. So Senator Warner, the sitting senator, gets a bill that passes. Granted, it's like some fair act, some easy low-hanging fruit that passes 98-0, but it passed. So the sitting senator gets a bill that passes right after he gets a challenger. And his office says, hey, do you want to talk to the senator for 5 minutes off the floor on this bill? Yeah, of course. But after this happened 2 or 3 times, I was in the basement of the Capitol. Warner's walking past me. And I always wear white bottom gym shoes. My hair's a little crazy. My tie's never done. And Senator Warner and his entourage, chief of staff, and press people were walking past. And Warner kind of like walks over by me and he goes, "Hey, this sounds like a story that NPR would be interested in." He gets a couple feet past me. And I go, "No, Senator, I'm not really interested in hearing from you. I only want to talk to this guy. What's his name? I hear Gillespie." And the senator comes walking back and he goes, "Hey." And his new press secretary, her face just like dropped, her jaw down to the floor. And the senator comes back and he goes, "Hey, I don't think this is proper attire for an NPR reporter." Yeah, so he got his dig on me. But it was my way to signal to him, no more free media for you. Next time I do a story on you, we're going to have Gillespie in it too, just to wait out that incumbency advantage. But these press offices get it, and especially because it's a lot of former reporters in the press office. They know how to hit our buttons. "Hey, we'll give you access." Well, what do we couple that with? So I think we just have to go out of our way to know the mind tricks they're playing with us, because they're good at it, possibly better than we are.
So it looks like you have to keep tabs on so many lawmakers and so many issues. How do you decide who you're going to follow today, or do you decide by issue or by lawmaker? How does it work?
By issue, some of my stations pay me more and use me more. So like Miami Public Radio, I do 2 stories a week for them. So I just know what I have to hit. They'll take more if I do it. But then WAMU, I know I'm basically on the air every day with them. So with them, I'll do more stories that might not involve as much research. My other stations, I'm becoming more of a feature service. I make more money off features, and I get to tell a more rich story. Just doing the 60-second radio spots or 45-second radio spots. I think those are important on like a war vote or State of the Union night. And those become easy stories, but I can't be everywhere. So a lot of times, even if news breaks, I won't pitch my editors. I'll just see if I run into, say, Senator Rubio or Senator Paul. And then if I get them, then I'll tell the station, "Hey, I've got reaction." But when news breaks, I can't just pitch all my stations. Otherwise, I'll have a lot of editors with thinking I failed them on something I promised.
So, I'm sorry, just to follow up on that same thought. So, for example, let's say right before they went on recess, the Syria arming authorization tucked into the continuing resolution. What did you do there? Did you grab a lawmaker from every?
That didn't excite me.
Did you do something on it?
That wasn't. I did some for a few of my stations, but that was just because every lawmaker was saying the same thing.
So, but did
they
you
all
tailor
wanted this vote. I don't know. I think lawmakers just passed the buck on that because it wasn't a war vote. The arming the Syrian rebels was interesting.
Right, but how did you handle it? I mean, did you?
I didn't really pitch it because I wasn't moved.
But you turned something.
For some of my stations.
And did you grab lawmakers from their area?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that one. Yeah, I think I just did it for a few. But then all the lawmakers kept saying the same thing, and all the lawmakers were demanding this vote on the war authorization, and yet they were demanding it just to the press, not to party leaders, because they were all happily washing their hands of it until after the election. So to me, it just became a non-tough vote for anyone.
But like something else, like a major budget. Like, are you, I'm interpreting your question, but like, are you tailoring the same story to each station?
Yeah.
That's a lot of work
That's
sometimes.
basically what Capital News Connection did, right?
Yeah.
You said you sort of took over their space, and they were, it's like a wire service.
Yeah.
Just write the same story.
It can be a lot of work, but
So are you the only person doing that? I mean, I think, would you consider yourself like a freelancer? Like, or it sounds like you're kind of like individually hired by all these stations, even though you collectively work for them all?
I'm credentialed. I have the Laslo Congressional Bureau, but yeah. So, public radio. We only have L.A. Public Radio as a correspondent, Minnesota Public Radio, Alaska Public Radio, and then one other. St. Louis Public Radio just got one. So it's only those 4 NPR stations across the U.S. have a correspondent on the Hill. And then I have about 15 or so stations, 20 that take stories from each year, but 15 that are my main ones.
And they're all NPR affiliates?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm trained in print.
So what do you have this, logistically, like how and where are you voicing your packages? And
Up in the Senate press gallery, there's a little studio back there. They want me to have a booth, but with all my interns. And then for me, the biggest asset for me as a one-man bureau is the reporters around me. So I like sitting out there because I'm general assignment. I get to hear what other reporters are working on. So either get tips or like hearing their phone calls and stuff is great. I would never, just being in the press gallery, you just get so many ideas. And then also being in the scrums at the Capitol, if everyone is sitting around Senator Wyden. Right now I don't have an Oregon station, but I'll go and hear what he's saying on tax policy or whatever, just to hear the information firsthand for one, but then also to give me ideas. And then hearing what other reporters are asking, especially the reporters who own their beats, whether it's the environmental reporters on the Hill or the defense reporters. These people sit in subcommittee and then committee and just know the insides and outs of the issues. So the reporters around me just become a wealth of information. And then also as general assignment, the biggest asset is just being friends with these reporters and calling them up and saying, hey, quick question. Are you on deadline? No? Hey, quick question. We're reporters. We're egomaniacal fucks. Pardon my French. So if you ask any reporter about their beat or to shed light on something, they're going to take the time to inform you. The press corps is wonderful.
Let me follow up for a second on one thing you said, this idea that you're in the scrum and you're listening to other people's questions and getting ideas for stories. So a lot of you in here really do own your beat. You're the ones sitting in those subcommittee hearings, et cetera. How do you feel about that, and do you make a special effort not to ask the question that's going to reveal your big scoop in the scrum? I mean, maybe that's obvious, but how do you feel about this idea that once you put the question out there, it's open season? Anybody?
I mean, I think it's something you're always aware of, because you've also always been the reporter who's overhearing someone else's question. Like, I don't think anyone's ever in only one position or the other. But yeah, I think if you're working on something that's totally exclusive, that like, no one else is hunting down, you don't ask that in the scrum. You follow that up. But if you're all covering the same thing that day, sometimes you can feed off each other's questions really well, and then everyone benefits.
And then it's probably also nice for beat reporters to hear a novice like me ask the question. Like, you always get a little embarrassed. Because for public radio, same with TV, you ask a little more softball because you want an emotive response. You already have the research, and you're not supposed to really use sound bites that are facts, per se. Because for one, the lawmaker is probably skewing the facts. And, you can say, if it's a fact and it can be backed up, I can voice that and cite it. But from the lawmaker, you want, ISIS, terrible, blah, blah, blah. You want that emotive punch. So asking the question like that, sometimes you get the lawmaker off script, which is what you want. And another thing I do, like you see the NPR reporters running around the Hill with the big headphones on and the big shotgun mic and all these cords. And they're always like, oh, Republicans don't like us because we're public radio. I'm like, no, they're freaking scared of you. You're terrifying. So I have one of these, the Zoom, but the one I use is Marantz PMD 620, which is about this size. So I just have a little, don't smoke, but I have the little windproof thing on the top because I used to be print. It's great. they forget there's a microphone there, and that's what I want. I want them to just remember they're talking to me. So when I do print stories with that, I'll take the one cover off and just put it down here. Still get the same audio quality. It could air if I needed it to, but half of it, I mean, because you see lawmakers when you have a TV camera in front of them, they're different than if you have a microphone in front of them, or if you just have a pen and paper, or if you have nothing. And their responses change per medium, or for how many lights and stuff, which is why I laughed at the 60 Minutes thing with Obama and also the Chuck Todd thing. They do all these behind-the-scene videos now that a producer shoots. They have like 30 people on set. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, then the president knows. He will never forget when you have 6 lights on him and 30 people standing around that he's a part of a TV production, not necessarily a part of news. He's just always going to be on guard. So when I take my crew down today, 2 cameramen and 1 sound guy, and I think the director is going to be holding one of the cameras. So light footprint, make them forget as much as possible that they're being filmed. And we do that in part by plowing them with beer, which is great.
Can you talk more about how the reporters from BuzzFeed, the Huffington Post, have changed the way that maybe you do your job because of the way that they approach their stories and the way that they distribute them, especially BuzzFeed?
Yeah, for public radio, it doesn't really, I don't know, maybe they've changed the industry, so maybe they've changed our editors' expectations, but I don't think a lot of my editors are reading BuzzFeed. Maybe a lot of their listeners are, but like even my friends at BuzzFeed, on the Hill, I'm always like, yeah, kitty lists. Then they're like, I don't do lists, I do stories. I'm like, I never read your stories. I'm on Dave Weigel's Google list thing, so I read the stories that people send out in that email blast. But besides that, I don't know where, like BuzzFeed doesn't really highlight their congressional and Supreme Court stuff, even though they have reporters who are great, who are doing good work. I know it's good that they're devoting resources to that. But public radio, we're drier. We take a little more time to tell a story. Yeah, I don't know if they've impacted me. One thing NPR does, which is kind of interesting, is they cycle through a lot of reporters on the Hill. So you'll have a reporter in for about a year, 9 months or so, like Audie Cornish before she became one of the hosts. They brought her up from Nashville, put her on the Hill for about 9 months or a year before she took over Weekend Edition. Sonari Glinton, who's their auto reporter in Detroit, they tossed him on the Hill about the same time. So they like to keep cycling in fresh eyes. And a part of me, as a congressional junkie, doesn't love that because there's so much about process that a lot of those reporters don't understand. But what they lack in that, they gain with just fresh eyes. So they're coming to the Capitol with fresh eyes. So you get a lot of interesting stories, things that have just become commonplace for me because I've been there 8 years. So something that maybe surprised me 8 years ago or 6 years ago, I've just accepted now is the way it is. But having fresh eyes come to the Capitol or a beat, I think has actually been pretty helpful, and they've told some good, compelling stories that I wouldn't have thought would even be a story because it's just the way it is in my eyes.
So one of the trends in public media especially is like CPD or Foundation or ACC giving stations or like a bunch of money to do their own reporting on specific issues that are facing their area. So like the one in Colorado, they just did a partnership on energy, like 5 other states.
Nice.
As that trend continues, just for your business model, does that excite you? Because that means there's more appetite for your stories and there's more money to pay you, or does that scare you? Because now that means that a lot of these stations can't do their own coverage.
Well, see, and that's what I want. Like, I just want to set up a freestanding bureau and then walk away. I want to write books and magazine articles and do lectures, but that's like my 10-year plan. But I love that. I want more collaboration. Like when I file for Miami Public Radio, that's the only station in the state that pays me, but I let them give my story away for free to the entire statewide network, because for me it's more about democracy and just having eyes and ears on my stories than the paycheck.
In Miami, is there like a transfer over? Because I know they have they got their partnership with the Herald, so when you file something for them on the radio side, does it
I think it goes on the Herald's website because they all have the same email addresses, and then I get paid from the Herald. But then, no, I like that. And there's interesting collaborations happening. This might answer your question as well. Some states are doing this a lot better, like St. Louis Public Radio now is a correspondent on the Hill. He just left NPR, the newscast desk, I forget his name right now. But what St. Louis Public Radio did is they teamed up with the local paper there, and they combined the newsrooms. So it's a pretty revolutionary model, and it seems to be working out well. NPR hires a lot of former print reporters. Peter Overby was print, Brian Naylor. I think most all of them came from print, because the NPR thinking is anyone can talk. Any voice is good. Ira Glass from This American Life, terrible nasally voice. Peter Overby, terrible voice. But they're intelligent, they're compelling storytellers, and any voice works on the radio. The thing is, with people who've just been trained in radio, the tendency is, I have to just write a 50-second piece and then a 60-second piece. I'm going to do enough research to write a 50-second piece. No. You do enough research to know and own the issue, and then your 50 seconds of copy becomes much more accessible but also dense in the research, and you're an expert. So I think that's why public radio likes former print reporters. They know the issues exhaustively, but then can also tell it in a compelling way, which can be learned. But one thing Minnesota Public Radio has done is because they've got a massive newsroom, they've got like 40 reporters or something, and they have 4 or 5 bureaus throughout the state. They've started giving away all their copy for free to the local papers across the state. So now when you pick up the small little like 6 or 10 page paper up in the northwest corner of the state, there'll be a little blurb with a small little article, and this is brought to you by Minnesota Public Radio. So I think the more collaboration, and with public radio, our market shares are going up, listenership is way up, which is great. I think we can now become an asset and hopefully rise the ship of our sinking print brethren.
I used to work in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And at a different station, the NBC station, they now have an on-camera reporter. Half their salary is paid by the station, and then the other half by Minnesota Public Radio.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a shared reporter
Yeah.
between public radio and television, which I haven't seen really anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think the more, and so that does make me optimistic, the more collaboration from these newsrooms, I think we need to start viewing ourselves less in competition with the other paper in town, the other media outlet, and the more we can bring these newsrooms that are all fighting for scarce resources, the more that we can combine our forces, the more we serve the public.
But does that concern you in terms of like exclusivity? Because the last show I worked for was under the same company as Southern California Public Radio,
Mm-hmm.
so Public Radio, and like the big debate was, SCPR, their competition, since they want to have like a big online robust.
Mm-hmm.
They're like our competition now is the LA Times. You know what I mean?
Huh.
Then like Minnesota Public Radio, they would say, we know what our competition is Minneapolis Star Tribune. So I mean, one concern that I've heard is like, we're all working together. How can we be exclusive? Is that concern you?
I don't care about exclusivity. I want readers. People are looking at kittens on BuzzFeed. If people are hearing stories about Congress or whatever your beat is, if you get readers, you get readers. The problem I see is just getting people to read.
In your opening remarks, you mentioned going down to Canon.
Yeah.
And the research we were talking about mail.
down.
Walk down and pull Frank Mail.
Yeah. So we had, I don't even know if I included it.
Can you also
No.
explain what you're talking about? What's Frank?
Frank's Mail. So the founding, the founding Congress, Frank is your signature. So the founding Congress, because lawmakers were so far away from the nation's capital, they decided that lawmakers. Did I just type it in up here? They that'll work. All right, the WAMU one came up. But so yeah, back in the horse and buggy days, it was a lot more important because lawmakers were stuck here in the Capitol for months on end. So a way for them to communicate with their constituents was through getting free postage. So instead of using a stamp, elected officials could sign their signature to replace the stamp. And then that was covered by tax dollars. Now, it's used for different things. I won't play this whole thing, but from the start of this, you'll get a sense. Is the volume on? See it ticking. Well, I'm radio, so I can just read it. So this piece starts with, to see what lawmakers send voters with your tax dollars, you have to go to the basement of a House office building. Photos are banned. Only black and white copies leave the sparse room. The privilege of elected office is dubbed franked mail, even though lawmakers now use it to buy Facebook, Twitter, and Google ads. Lawmakers are alerted each time a reporter, researcher, or, say, political opponent asks to see what they've sent voters. Why all the secrecy? Melanie Sloan of Cruz says blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so it's interesting. But go down there. You all should. It's kind of a weird relic, and I didn't know until lawmakers started coming up to me like, hey, you're digging around in my documents, that they get sent a form that says this has been sent out. But a lot of them used to be these big colored placards on thick copy that looks just straight up like campaign material. And remember, Republicans ran on repeal and replace Obamacare? A lot of the Republican things sent out say, I'm fighting for you every day to repeal and replace Obamacare. So it looks like straight up campaign material. And there's a Republican and then a Democratic staffer on the ethics committee that okay all of this. So the lawmakers say, it was okayed by this bipartisan panel. And then even lawmakers who don't use it say, oh, I'm not going to get on anyone else, any of my colleagues who use it. So lawmakers, it's just like this open secret, for lack of a better cliche, that they all have that pads their re-elections. Because, I mean, if you get $300,000 of taxpayer dollars to send out your name to voters, and they also use it for radio ads out in the West, little public service announcements, but half of incumbency is just name recognition. I mean, if you're a challenger, the first thing you do to win is get your name out there. So lawmakers are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars to reinforce their name in voters' minds under the guise, I'd say, of constituent services. Go play around down there. But yeah, you give any lawmaker's name and they bring you a stack, and then you can make copies down there for 10 cents, but no color copies. So you can never really portray to voters unless the voter actually has received it.
Can you take pictures using your iPhone?
So what one of my interns found out is if you turn your volume off on your phone, you can take pictures.
As long as they don't hear the
Yes.
clicking.
But then once they hear the clicking, they'll ask you to stop, and then you just say, I'm sorry. So turn your volume off and take all the pictures you want.
What else is in the basement of Canon? I mean, are there other records down there that you're aware of?
I don't know. That's the
Where
main
are the bodies buried?
I know. Tell me.
Thank you for rephrasing my question. That's exactly what I wanted to know.
I don't know. That's kind of the main one I've used. The senators don't really use franking because it's been capped at 50,000, so you can't really communicate with an entire state, which is 50 grand. So they've kind of cut off the privilege from themselves, but the House members love it and bathe in it annually.
Can you talk a little bit about source management? I find Capitol Hill so much of it is like a give and a take, and one day you do a story that, you know, upsets staff members, and then you're cut off for a week, or, you know, can you just talk about how you navigate that?
Just buy your sources drinks, and then everything that, I don't know. They'll be pissed off at you sometimes. You'll be pissed off at them sometimes.
Right.
I don't know.
It's just part of Capitol Hill.
Yeah. They get over it. It's weird now. What I've been dealing with now is lawmakers leading up to the election get very standoffish. Even we're finding that with Bills and Brews. Lawmakers who agreed to come on and have a beer with me a few months ago are now like, oh, I can do it November 12th that week. Which, it's like, oh, great. Yeah, and then a lot of the press secretaries would call me up, especially on the Frank's mail piece, and they'd say, hey, you need to alert me before doing interviews. I'm like, what changed? And they're like, oh, because I was asking about your lawmakers spending the most in the Florida delegation. But I'm like, I don't really go through my press secretaries. I just go straight to the lawmakers, which gives me a bad relationship with some press secretaries.
How do you do that? How do you go straight to the lawmaker and get that
You'll
access?
see it today in the speaker's lobby on the Hill, where you write in cards for the House members. But then, because I'm a regional reporter, the delegations and the lawmakers know me, which has taken years to cultivate those relationships. But I'm fair, trustworthy. I think I average a mistake every 3 years. At least that's caught. Or that comes to my attention. So by really just doing good work, it gains the trust of the lawmakers. Yeah, so. No, and then the lawmakers, they know, because I'm their only, for Wyoming Public Radio, I'm their only regional for a lot of my other stations. I think I'm the only regional. So when Rubio knows me as Miami Public Radio, he'll stop for me and not other reporters just because I'm his local guy. And as much as he's running for president, he still wants to be a senator if he loses.
But of course, Rubio has other people covering him, because
Yeah.
Florida papers have people on the Hill. But there must be a lot of people who literally there is no print or any other reporter in the Capitol covering them. So other than their own franking or their own, they have no way of getting their name in the local paper at all.
And that becomes the other hard part for me. A lot of them have gotten used to getting reelected without ever talking to reporters, or just talking to uninformed reporters at home who are just googly-eyed because they talked to this federal lawmaker and what they said is so important without actually parsing through what they said. So a lot of lawmakers, like Bob Goodlatte, I used him in a piece this morning on the new Virginia voter ID law, but a local reporter on the ground and part of the Virginia Public Radio Network sent that to me because Goodlatte won't talk to me. He sees me as this national reporter on the Hill, and he doesn't need me because he can spin his local reporters, and he doesn't even need them for re-election at this point. So a lot of lawmakers have gotten used to just completely bypassing the press corps, which sucks.
So earlier you talked about a manipulable track that a press secretary calls into. What are some other things that, like, if you aren't up in the Hill very often, you should be aware of that press secretaries might try to?
I don't know. Maybe
have
other.
you ever had a situation where a lawmaker or a press secretary told you something, you ran it, and then they said, no, we never said that, or you took it out of context, or?
Yeah, you get that pushback. And then sometimes lawmakers speak in lawmaker.
Right.
So they say something that we all know means something, or what was the story? Yeah, when I was filling in for Joe Morton the former board president. He was embedded with troops in Afghanistan from Omaha. He's the correspondent for the Omaha World Herald. And who was it? I really pissed off this guy. Peterson. Maybe. I see his face. But the congressman, it was at the time of the Paul Ryan budget, which was the only budget on Capitol Hill. And he's a very conservative guy. So he tells me, I kind of catch him in the hall, and he tells me, yeah, I'm still reviewing it, but I'm leaning towards supporting it, so I print this. Everyone else in the delegation was for it. And then his press secretary calls him and goes, no, he's for the Ryan budget. And then, like, my editor from out there, who I didn't really know, was calling me and was like, hey, they're saying he's for it. But I'm like, here's the conversation we had. Like, what budget were they talking about? The congressman said he's still reviewing it. He's in such a conservative district that he just needed, or his press secretary was telling him, like, you just need knee-jerk support for this Ryan budget. Our voters know about it. So it was just kind of funny to see that the lawmaker was getting punished for being thoughtful, for saying he was going to take time to digest this document that had just come out.
A recording.
Yeah.
Conversation,
Yeah.
So.
And the recording, and you guys all have iPhones or whatever, just that backup. My rule is you never send in office the raw audio. You send it to an editor, have them review it, and then your editor should have your back, or you apologize. But you shouldn't have to apologize. And then there'll be a rare time where I've played the audio over a speaker for the press secretary. They can record it if they want. But I would never send them the audio, because for one, then they might put that on their website or put that with their campaign material, and then put something, this was given to me by NPR correspondent Matt Laslo, which then it looks like you're in collusion with them. So it's just better to not fall into that trap.
How do you think about, you say you come from a print background, and when we talk about newsrooms conglomerating, everyone needs an audio component, a video component, a print component. How do you think about putting a story together for radio versus print, and do you think about how you can still try to make it go viral, which it seems like every story kind of needs?
We're public radio. We don't think about viral. People are forced to listen to me. But yeah, it's just different styles of storytelling. In print, I've got a couple pieces I've done for The Atlantic, and those, I did a more Wall Street Journal style with lawmakers on the campaign trail, or met new lawmakers out at Reagan. So you paint a little bit more of a picture visually. And in print, I don't use many quotes, because I'd rather do exhaustive research and then just tell the story. And in radio, you have to use quotes because it becomes boring if the narrator is talking for more than, say, 25 seconds. But still the same exhaustive research. It's just, you're kind of bouncing. You're pulling listeners from one piece of audio to another, to another. So you're letting the voices tell the story, as opposed to me doing this and just sitting here talking the whole time, which
And
is
how do you
boring me.
get- when some stuff, congressional stuff is pretty dense, like how do you think about parsing that in a way that someone sitting in their car can process it?
I don't know. Just the same way you do it. Yeah. Just, I don't know, interesting
Would you
opening.
write more conversationally for radio than you would for The Atlantic or for print, or no?
Probably. And they also say for public radio you want to talk to someone at a fourth grade level, so it's just easily comprehended. But then you're going to realize there's going to be a fourth grader in the back seat of the car while the PhD is driving to work, so it's got to be for both. And then, yeah, it's just language, just playing around. I don't like sensationalizing things too much. But there's ways to pull listeners in, and whether it's just one line, Peter Overby is probably the best at this, who does a lot of the money and politics stories for NPR, and he'll take really dense, boring but he'll take really dense, boring stuff and make it very compelling. Because that's a part of what we do, like the policy debate should excite us, or we shouldn't be in DC. So if we're excited by it, how do we portray to listeners, hey, you should care about this too. And yeah, like, it jazzes me. So I think I went through withdrawals in August. I was like, I had all these features to do, but it was taking me weeks to do them. And I was like, why? What's wrong with me? And I was like, oh, Congress isn't here. Like, Congress is my caffeine. So once Congress stops being your caffeine, or the Defense Department stops being your caffeine, either get a new beat or get a new job. And if you can't portray that excitement to your listeners or audience, then you're in the wrong field. And we don't have audio here, but you guys should check out my I'm gonna plug my show one more time, but you guys should check out billsandbrews.com. I've teamed up with Comedy Central's Drunk History. Teamed up with one of their producers, who's my co-executive producer on this show. But the gist of it is me sitting down with lawmakers, and we just so this is a commercial we did for it, which is me breaking the law across the town and drinking beers in front of every monument. It's really fun. Of course, ATF building. But yes, we're going down to North Carolina right now. We did a Kickstarter. We raised like $36K for the first season, which we're now going to go down and shoot. I still had a job after this.
You do this all in like 2 hours right now?
Over.
How do I make this happen? By the last one, he's sideways.
It's a hard job. But like, even things like this, it's just, I'm going to have a much different audience with this show than I'm going to have with public radio. So with this, it's about, I don't know. For one, we call this ridding Washington of partisanship, one sip at a time. So we just kind of have simple pub chats with lawmakers. We had Congressman DeFazio on for the premiere. He's the head of the Small Brewers Caucus from Oregon. And so I brought him to Blue Jacket. We shot him in the cast room, and I was like, hey, Congressman, I know you found the Progressive Caucus. I know you're anti-war, but are you anti-war? And I bust out a deck of cards and challenged him to a game of war with a candidate we're shooting in North Carolina. I'm going to play shuffleboard with him, I think. So it's just getting lawmakers off their script, getting them to be a little more human, and hopefully also to get an audience that doesn't really care about politics or that's been jaded by politics to tune in and care. DeFazio is progressive, like I said. One thing we do for the show is we never say their party. And so a lot of my Republican friends were really into DeFazio after the show and went and researched him, and they're like, I didn't know he was a raging liberal. So there's something about putting a beer in lawmakers' hands and just having a simple pub chat with them. It's a little bit more biographical. We talk about them. We ask each lawmaker what or how old they were for their first beer or drink. DeFazio was like, I was probably 16. I'd go to, so he admitted to breaking the law. He's like, I was like 16, 17, and I'd go to gas stations up in Boston, and we'd get shady characters to go in and buy us Schlitz or Black Label. So you get lawmakers to say some interesting things. So we're having fun with it, even though a lot of lawmakers who told me they'd be on, like Senator Warner, are now getting cold feet because of their elections. But we're going to work around that. I was trying to get Warner and Gillespie to do it together, which Gillespie agreed to. And Warner's people had told me he wanted to be on the day after it came out. And then I emailed him. I was like, did you see the show? And they still wanted it because craft breweries have popped up in every district. So it's local jobs for all these lawmakers. And it's younger voters. So we've had about 15 or so lawmakers email us requesting to be on. But now that it's election season, they're getting cold feet. So we're finding workarounds. But wait for it. Next week, I guess, hopefully by the 15th, the episode that we're shooting today and tomorrow in Durham should be out.
So how long does it take you to do an episode, shooting and then editing?
This one, so I have an editor up in Brooklyn. We'll send her the hard drive on Wednesday when we get back. But hopefully...
So wait, you're literally going to send a piece of hardware, like through the mail?
Yeah, I have the Google Drive, but Google's still working out some kinks in it. So sometimes media you upload through that doesn't quite go. So I'm just I have that little external hard drive, so I'll just overnight it to her, and then we'll send her, so we'll send her all the notes from today's shoot, today and tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll probably spend about 2 hours with the candidate, and then tonight we're going to do more of a bar crawl, me interviewing. It's going to be a little more, we'll see, a little more me than I like. But it should, hopefully, we get it done in 2 days. I have Wednesday blocked off in case we need it.
And then how does the editing work? You said you're sending it to an editor in Boston or Connecticut?
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. So how does that work? Does that do you work closely with that person?
Yeah, and we'll send her all the notes. And already in the script, I have the elements. So I kind of did this at least this episode. The first one was just more of a conversation with DeFazio. This one will have that same conversation and same style with all the different segments we have in there. But then we're also going to package it with some interviews with brewers, interviews with voters at bars. So it'll be more like a TV segment or like a TV journalist segment, which is a little different. But hopefully we'll just get all the elements we need, and we'll know this interview is the one we're going with, this here, and then we'll get all the time codes, and hopefully it's pain-free.
Put it together based on your diagram.
Yeah. And we'll just see what we get. But I have to hit the road.
Yes, you do, but you're going to leave with a
Oh,
note
yes.
from the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios,
Oh, cool.
which is our new studio here. So thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
This was great.
Pleasure.